Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to part 2 of the marble drop tutorial. So in this tutorial, we're going to add the marbles so that we can make them drop. So let's get right to it. Before, however, you can see that nothing is spinning here out of the things that we added. So I'm going to click on Reload Trusted and click on Revert so that we got some spinning going on. And of course, I'm going to go down here and turn on the screencast keys for y'all. Alright, so now let's close that up, and what we're going to do is first go into top view by hitting 7 on the numpad, and then left click right there, just in between that square, and hit Shift A. Let's add in a mesh circle, and let's bring it down and place it right at the base of our conveyor belt. Cool. Now hit RX90, rotate it 90 degrees on the x-axis, and RZ90 to rotate it 90 degrees on the z-axis. Hitting tab to go into edit mode, let's B to box select all these, minus those 3, X, and delete the vertices. Cool! You can tell I'm in a good mood today once again, so hope you guys are doing well. Let me know in the comments down below. Alright, hitting tab to go into edit mode, A to select everything, E to extrude. Let's bring that out on the x-axis. And then bring this out to so. Cool. Now hitting Shift S, cursor to selected. Let's then hit Shift A, add in a mesh UV sphere. And there's our marble. It's looking a little bit blocky, so let's click on smooth shading. And with the ramp as well, smooth shading. Grab the marble. Let's bring it up. And now, let's make sure this is centered as well. Make sure it's in front of the conveyor belt. I'm going to scale this down a little bit. It's looking more like a dodgeball than a marble. Hey, dodgeball was fun, man. Alright, now let's add in some movement to this because this is looking a little bit stale. So going to the Physics tab, let's go ahead and click on Rigid Body, and let's go ahead and change this to from convex hull to mesh. Now, I have a whole other tutorial on rigid body physics, so make sure to check that out if you'd like. I'm not going to force you, but if you'd like. Now, let's change this one to rigid body, and let's make it passive. So basically, in short, and let's also make it a mesh. Basically, in short, passive means that it won't have rigid body to it, but it will affect the rigid bodies. And active means that it's going to be an active rigid body, meaning that it's going to be moving around and animating and dropping. So the active rigid bodies will interact with the passive rigid bodies, such as if we hit Alt-A to play, you can see that nothing's happening for some reason, and all we have to do is go over here and change it to active once again, and now it works. Don't ask me why, it's another Blender glitch right there. So now you can see that it interacts with this. Pretty cool. And now what we want to do is bring this out a bit. We want to select the cup right here because you can see that it's just going through the ball. Select this right here, change it to rigid body, and change it to passive. And make sure to click on animated because if you don't, it's not going to do anything either. So click on animated, and because it's actually animated around our conveyor belt, now when we hit Alt-A, you can see that it works, except it's batting it out of the scene, which is not good. So, in order to fix that, let's just bring this forward a little bit, hit Alt-A, and you can see that it's still batting it out. So, a couple things that we want to do actually, one of which is that right now how our scene is set up is actually way too big for the rigid body physics. So they're going to interact a little bit strangely. For example, right now, the mass of it, let's actually calculate the mass. Let's go to physics, calculate mass, and this will basically give our object a mass or a weight to it. So let's click on calculate mass and let's put it to brass. I want something nice and heavy. And now if we hit Alt-A, you can see that it still bounces out. Another thing we could do is go over here and select this and bring the friction up a lot And this will make it so that it's not as bouncy. We want to leave the bounciness on the ball there. But the main thing that's going to fix this for us is a couple things. First of all, let's make sure to change this to mesh. And basically what this is the shape that's around the rigid body physics. So when it's convex hull, it's basically, it gives it a general shape around this. But when it's set to mesh, the actual rigid body physics will be exactly to the shape of the mesh. So it gives it a much more precise rigid body physics interaction. You can see that now it's actually working. So, because again, with convex hull, it kind of goes over the opening and everything. With the mesh, it's following the exact shape of the mesh. Now, you can see that it's working over here and it's looking pretty good. Now, a couple of things. If we add a second ball, so if I grab the ball, hit Shift D, and add in a second ball, you can see that it completely knocks that ball out of the house. So, a couple things that helps to make the rigid body's physics work a lot better. If we hit the N key to bring up the properties, and go to scale, and then if I hit A to select everything, and make sure to select the conveyor belt last, let's now hit S to scale everything down, and let's scale it down to 0.3, and let's bring it down. Now, one thing that we want to do is with the marble holder, you can see that it's all out of whack. So one thing we want to do is hit Control A, apply the scale, select it, hit Tab to go into edit mode, and just bring it out to over here and bring it down under right there. Now, if we hit Alt A to play it, you can see that all is good. Now, if yours is rotated a little funky, you might need to change the rotation here as well. You can see that right there. It's a little weird, so I need it on the Y-axis. Cool. So now what this does is basically, because it's scaled smaller, it will actually help us a bit with the rest of the rigid body physics, because now the calculations are calculated on a smaller scale and not so large. Now, going back to the rigid body physics, let's first select this, grab this, and extend it out. And then what I want to do is select this and make sure that the friction is at 1, mesh, deform, etc. And now if we hit Alt A, you can see that it's hitting it out still a little bit too much. So you can see that right here, it's coming out way too far. So I'm going to grab all of these, and on frame 1, hit G and X and bring them out. Now, another thing I want to do, because I don't want the balls just falling off right here. So what I'm going to do is select this, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then Shift A, I'm going to add a mesh plane, R to rotate, and 90 degrees, and bring it out to right here. And this plane is basically going to hold back the marbles, and I'm going to click on rigid body, change it to passive, and leave it like that. Now, I need to bring these a little bit forward because now it's too far. There we go. Let me see if the ball's in there. You just want to position it so that the holder grabs the marble. But you also want to position it so that it doesn't hit the other one too much as well. So right around there seems good. And of course, well, right there it's a little... With rigid body physics, sometimes it's a little tricky. And one thing I'm going to do actually is select the marbles, bring them down a bit because they're a bit too big. And then just bring these forward. And you kind of have to play around with it and tweak it. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale these back up because the mass is better. I'm going to take this, hit tab, scale it up a bit, and see how that looks. Cool. And then I'm going to bring these back. You don't want to have the marbles too small, because if they are, it gets a little crazy. And this thing is a bit too big as well. There we go, that's perfect. Cool, so if the ball gets knocked back a little bit, that's fine. You could tweak it to where it doesn't get knocked back as far. But what I'm going to have here is, let's actually go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to put my cursor there, Shift-A, add a mesh plane. Bring this out. And I'm going to have some kind of bin right here for the marbles. So tab to go into edit mode. Select all these vertices, E to extrude. And actually minus these vertices right here. I'm just going to go in edge select mode and select these 3 edges. E to extrude, Z. Bring it up and hit G and Z and bring that up as well. Alright, cool. Now, Alt right clicking the edge loop, S and Y. Let's scale it down on the Y axis. And then SZ, let's bring that down. Those are a little bit high. And then just position this right around there. Something like that. Cool. So now if the ball gets knocked back, it's just going to go in here. And of course, we need to change it to rigid body and change it to passive as well. All right, cool. And then also we want to make sure that it's set to mesh. Otherwise, we might get some strange things happening there as well. And of course, hit S and Y to scale it up so that it's a little bit bigger. And now with this ball, I'm actually going to change the friction all the way down. And with the original one as well, I'm going to change the friction all the way to 0 as well. So there we go. Now the balls are actually have a much better interaction with all of our scene. So once again, the main things to keep in mind is to have them set to mesh as the outlay. And you can see that right here, it's hitting our ball, but our ball is kind of jumping out of it because it's not set up, it's not aligned exactly perfectly. So what I'm going to do to set this up even more, and this is the trickiest part right here. Once you get this going, the rest is easy, you know, adding the slides and all that. But this is definitely the trickiest part of it. But what I want to do is add a second of these baskets, and very easily, in order to do that, we just go to the Constraints tab here, hit Shift-D, right-click to leave it in the center, and then we're going to increase the offset over here. Like that. And another thing, actually, that I noticed is this. I'm going to go in Edit mode and make it more centered first before I copy it over. And maybe bring it out. Now this is definitely one of my tutorials where it's not as straightforward as other ones, because when you're dealing with rigid body physics, it's a lot of tweaking and everything of it. And it also depends what size you have of it. So it changes all the time. So let's hit Alt-A to check this out. I'm actually going to change the offset of this more so that we could see what happens with the second ball once it comes back down. All right, so that is working out beautifully right there. So let's make sure to save our file, save as test2. And once again, this rigid bodies, you definitely have to tweak it and play around with it, because depending on your scale, it might be different settings and everything. But again, keep in mind the main settings are the bounciness factors, the friction, the bounciness, the mesh, the mass, and also the scale of your object in general. So let's go ahead and add in the ramps now. We got the main part of it taken care of. And we might need to do some extra tweaking, but for now, let's go ahead and add in some ramps because that's getting a little technical down there. So let's go to the top, Shift-A, add a circle, and bring the circle up because now it's all the way at the bottom. Hit Tab to go into edit mode. Sounded like a sheep when I said that. All right, E to extrude, and S to scale it in. G and Z and bring it down. And then Alt right click this ring right here, E to extrude, Z, and bring it up. And now let's go ahead and click on rigid body and make this passive as well. And like you know, change it to mesh. So when our ball gets launched, it lands about right here, I believe. So we could try that out by hitting Alt A to play. Boom. Cool. Awesome. So now all we need to do is scale this up a bit because the ball is not falling through. And now let's go ahead and add in a couple of things and we'll play around with it as we go. I'm going to change this to smooth. And the first thing I'm going to do is add in one ramp. So Shift S, cursor to selected. The way we're going to add in ramps is with the curves. So the curves makes it much easier to add in the ramps. Pretty cool. Shift A, add a mesh, or actually not a mesh, we're going to add a curve. I just said that. And we're going to add a Bezier curve. Go into the curve settings over here. We're going to change the depth first of all. And then the resolution, we're going to bump it up as well. And let's bring this down under and hit R, X, and rotate it 90 degrees on the X-axis, negative. Cool, and then we could scale it up. And now hitting Tab to go into edit mode. Let's go ahead and grab these and hit E to extrude. And kind of extrude it however you want your tower or your thing to be. So I'm gonna make mine like that. Make sure that it's going down as well, otherwise the marble's not gonna really have any gravity. Cool, something like that for me. And now all you have to do is you want to make sure that it's good how you want it, because what we need to do now is, because this is a curve, we can't add rigid bodies to it. So we need to hit Alt C and convert it to a mesh. So now instead of being a curve, if we hit Tab to go into edit mode, you can see that it is now a mesh object. And right here, it's kind of curving a little bit weird. So I'm going to hit Alt R to select. And first, you can see that right here, it's also separated. So hitting A to select everything, W, remove doubles. And now what I'm going to do is hit Alt, right click, and 0, or the O key, sorry, to bring up proportional editing. And then just rotate this around so that it's a little bit straighter like that. Of course, you could also definitely do this in the curve mode if you see that before, but you could also change it in edit mode. So I just want to show you how you're able to change it in edit mode relatively easily. All right, cool. So now let's give that a test. And of course, we need to add rigid body to it and make sure that it's passive and change it to a mesh as well. Now, like I said, this tutorial is definitely one of the ones where it's kind of interesting because the settings definitely change a lot often. So another thing, make sure that the friction is down all the way to 0. Otherwise, it's going to be a bit too grippy. And also, we might need to make it so that it's slanting downwards a bit more, because right now it's just a wee bit slow. So let's grab this. I'm actually going to grab the whole thing and rotate it down. And again, this is a lot of, tweaking, trial and error with how the physics interact. So that's looking nice right there. And right there, it's obviously jumping off. So what we want to do is just select these vertices here, and E to extrude, Z. And we're going to add one of those buffering, you know, if you've ever been to Raging Waters or a water park, they got these big sides on it so that you don't freaking fly off the slide. Well, that's what we're doing here for our marble. All right, pretty cool. That looks awesome, if I do say so myself. So, and I did say so myself, so it looks awesome. So now let's go ahead and continue. And again, with this, you just want to hit Alt-A and play it every now and then. Make sure your tower is working properly. Let's go ahead and hit Shift-A. Let's add in another curve, Bezier curve. And we're going to bring this one over here. And I'm going to keep this tower fairly simple. I mean, you could go crazy with it, but I don't want to take too much time, going over this. I'm going to go over here and increase the depth and the resolution once again. Because like I said, I don't want to waste like an hour here creating the most awesome tower. I just want to show you the basics, and then you could go crazy if you want and create whatever you want. Now, hitting tab to go into edit mode, I'm going to rotate these, turn off proportional editing with the O key first, bring these out, scale it up, and then we can, let's see, something we can do. Let's actually give that a try. It might add to the length of the tutorial, but I want to make it kind of cool. All right, stay with me, ladies and gentlemen. It might be a little bit longer, but all right. So now what we're gonna do is basically, I want to show you another thing that we could do with these rigid body physics, which is pretty cool, that you could add to your trampoline tower or your marble drop tower. First, let's hit. Let's make sure that this is aligned. Cool. Hit Alt-C, convert it to a mesh, and we're going to click on, not fluid. We're going to click on rigid body and change it to passive and mesh. And now hit tab to go into edit mode. A to select everything, W, remove doubles. So now let's just make sure that, let's bring this out a little bit, align it more. Just make sure that everything is working. We might actually need to, while that's running, go down here to timeline and increase the end frame to a lot more so that it doesn't just end. All right, and once again, you got to turn the friction down to 0. That was completely my bad. Turn the friction down to 0 so that it's not, so that there's no friction. You can see that it's stopping right here. So what we want to do is actually go over here to the object data tab, or actually, it's actually the scene tab right here. Go to the scene tab and go to rigid body cache, not the field weights. And we're going to increase the cache to, just increase it to 10,000. That way now, if we hit Alt-A, you will see that it works fine, because right now it was set to 250, so at 250 it stopped calculating the rigid body physics. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're basically going to grab this funnel right here and hit Shift D, copy it over, and hit 7 on the numpad to go into top view, and let's just bring it out to about here. Now, hitting tab to go into edit mode on this one, I'm going to hit G and Y, bring it out a bit. Now, let's see how that works. It seems that I'm not quite sure it's going to be aligned exactly, but let's try it out. Yeah, it is. Except the second ball dropped somewhere. So let's see where it drops, the second ball. What just happened to the second ball right there? All right, let's see. That's a rather interesting result right there. So let's see. What I'm going to do is actually just grab the second ball, delete it, Shifty, and copy this first one. All right, there we go, except just one last thing. So to fix that, all we need to do is go over here to friction and put it to 0.1. And put the friction of this one to 0.1 as well. And then make sure the friction of this is at 1. That should fix it. Again, this is a lot of tweaking and, you know, shifting the values of different things. But that should be good. And what I'm going to do is actually select this second, the second cup holder or ball holder. I'm going to change the offset to make it offset even more. There we go. Let's see how that goes. Looking good so far. Cool, so it seems that it's working pretty well now. You could let it run. Usually if it runs like 3 or 4 runs, it's usually pretty good. So that is pretty much how you create a marble drop little animation there. And of course, you could select this and hit the H key to hide it so that it's not in the way, and it will still block the balls because it's still there. And also, you could even, if we hit Alt H, select it and go down here and go to the, where is it? I think it's in the Object tab. Actually, all we have to do is go over here to the outliner, go to plane, and deselect the renderer so it's not rendered as well. And we could hit H to hide it. And there we go. So that's pretty much how you do a marble drop little animation thing here. So definitely takes a lot of tweaking and, you know, changing it up a bit. But the main things to keep in mind is to tweak the bounciness of it, the friction. You could tweak the mesh and make sure that it's on mesh. Increase the size. The size definitely affects the outcome of this. And so there's lots of different little tweaks that you could do, but all in all, once you get the correct tweaks, you can see that it runs nice and smoothly. So the main thing with this kind of tutorial is that it's a lot of tweaking and it's different every single time. So for the next future tutorials, it's going to be a lot more straightforward and not so much, you know, just kind of guesswork, I could kind of call it. But, you know, this was precise guesswork. So with that, I'll see you in the next tutorial. And again, appreciate you all. Let me know if you have any requests for anything. And yeah, so one of the reasons also that I couldn't give exact values is because literally, if you move this, instead of, let's say my last tutorial, I had built it and it's like this, and in this tutorial, it's just right here, that's going to change the whole interaction of the rigid body physics and of the marble drop, because now the marble might bounce a different way and it's going to have less speed, and so this is going to interact differently and whatnot. So once again, now it seems to be all good and dandy. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Sorry if this was a bit long, but I did want to show you this because there's lots of valuable information, and also it's really cool once you make it and once you get all the settings correct. I mean, it's pretty sweet. You gotta admit. All right, see you in the next one. Ciao for now. Au revoir.